Hello, everyone. Hi. Welcome back after a long break. We've had a whole week of no talks, and I'm sure you missed us. We missed you.
We did indeed.
With a bang.
It's been so strange not having talks. Haven't you felt like it's been weird not being on?
Yes. I've actually missed it. I've missed doing this. So it's nice to be back. So if you haven't watched us before, I'm Claire Ems from the Conscious Parenting Association South Africa, as you can see. And next to me is Jess. And to start with, Jess, if you want to introduce yourself, and then we can do the prizes.
Yeah, I'm Jess, and I'm a co-founder with Claire of the CPASA. And so last week I did a conversation with Claire when we spoke about kids and dogs and cats and rats and ducks and all of them. And so I had two gifts to give away. And the one was a consultation with myself, which is a 90-minute behavior consultation for you and your family and your pets. And the winner for that is Christelle Rotenbach.
Hey.
So, yeah, well done.
Congrats,
and then
Christelle.
my other congrats, Christelle. And I will you can send an email to admin@cpsa.org.za to claim your prize. And I will tag you as well in the last one so that you know. We don't want you to miss out. And then the Dogs and Children Masterclass is going to Joe VB. And I know Joe asked some questions on the last one, and she's got a puppy, so this will be great for you.
Cool.
And so there you are. You're welcome.
Congrats, guys.
What are we talking about today?
Cool. So today is all about the science behind behavior. So all about your kid's brain and what it's actually doing when they behave a certain way, and how you can help them and how you can respond in a different way. So yeah, we can bring in our lovely guests, and they're going to tell us.
This is like my favorite thing in the whole wide world to learn about. So I'm very excited to hear everything that everyone has to say. I'm going to be off, and I'll bring in our lovely guests. Bye.
Cheers.
Hello.
Hi, guys. Hi. So today we have the lovely Lara from Rooyen Parenting, and we have Kelly from Conscious Confident Parenting. Did I get it the right way around?
Yeah,
yes, Conscious Confident Parenting. Welcome, guys. Thank you so much. Lara and Kelly are both founding members of our association, so we work quite closely together, and yeah, we love chatting about all this stuff. So this is just a follow-on from like every time we talk. Okay, so for everyone else, to start with, let's do a bit of an intro so they can get to know you a little bit. I know some of you have probably watched Lara at a previous talk, but Lara, if you want to kick off and just remind everyone who you are, and then we'll hand over to Kelly.
Thanks, Claire. I'm Lara. I'm from Rooyen Parenting. My background is in Montessori, positive discipline, and respectful and conscious parenting. And for me, I really like to focus on communication, what's happening in our brain, what's happening in our kids' brain, and how we can sort of interact with them in a holistic way that supports connection for them. For me, it's really a personal journey as well. I've been parenting my own child like this, and so I've had the first-hand experience of the benefits of just parenting this way. And it's not just my relationship with my child that's changed, it's my relationship with myself and how I process triggers and how I end up showing up in the world and for everyone else in my life and for the community. And I do play groups and I do workshops to help give other people the skills and the knowledge to do the same. And I think it's just really important that we all come together and support one another.
Thanks, Lara. And yeah, Kelly, if you can tell us a bit about yourself.
Sure. I've also got a Montessori background like Lara, and the school that I taught at was very focused on positive discipline and nurturing the child as a whole. And it's something I really wanted to take into my parenting because it's all I knew in terms of interacting with children. And then I had twins, and they came very early, and it was a NICU stay and a lot of trauma around their birth and entry into this world. And I struggled to parent peacefully in that I would do it, but I would be emotionally burnt out. And I realized that society as a whole doesn't support parents who want to do this. There's a very little support. And I came across hand-in-hand parenting and enrolled in a parent starter class, and then did the instructor course, which I completed at the end of last year. And the tools I learned there, like Lara said, it's changed my relationship with my children. It changed my relationship with my partner, my friends and family, and most importantly, myself. I learned a lot about myself, and parenting is actually such a huge part of it, is learning about yourself. What are your triggers? How can you look after yourself to be a good parent and have a good relationship with your children? So I run courses and do consultations for parents who want to learn the tools. Yeah.
Thanks, Kelly. As you said that, it reminded me, I was speaking to some of the other members the other day when we did another talk, and we were saying how it's almost not the Conscious Parenting Association, it's like the Conscious Human Association, because the way you treat your kids relates to everything. So thanks for saying that as well. 100%. That's so true. Okay, so today we're talking about the brain. And obviously we know, and the parents watching at home, what you see at home is behavior. Oh, Jade's excited for today's chat. Yay. What you see is behavior. That's what you as parents are seeing. That's what we see from our children. But maybe, Lara, maybe you can tell us a little bit about sort of today's understanding now of like the brain and the different words that we may be using today that people may not be comfortable with or what's the word?
Familiar with, yeah.
Familiar with, that's the word. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, we've really come to a space where we're now seeing and understanding behavior, and specifically, I suppose, misbehavior or behavior that doesn't allow for flexibility or presence in the moment, as dysregulation. And so it's when our brain isn't able to be fully there, fully present, and regulate itself. So there's dysregulation, and that can look like a few things. That can be our child whining or having a tantrum or hitting. Those impulsive things are also a form of dysregulation. And then it can happen in ourselves as parents, right? That can be when we are so stuck in our thinking mind, right? We can't be present in our emotions, or we get too caught by our emotions. And so the really beautiful thing that's coming up now is emotional navigation, and how to recognize our responses to things, our emotions to things, and how that really connects to how our children are responding to things, right? So we're going to look at co-regulation, and what that is us regulating ourselves first so that we can help our children. And it looks very different for everyone. And one of the biggest things and biggest factors we need to learn about and understand is our environments, right? Like Kelly was saying, we need the support system. We need our whole community to be coming together so that we are supporting parents and caregivers and teachers and all these people so that they have the foundation to learn these skills and to actually apply these skills.
Yeah, definitely. And those of you watching at home, if you felt this way or your child has displayed these behaviors, let us know, ask us questions about it. That's what we're here for today. We'd love to hear what you want to know from us as well as we do our interview. Okay, so all that being said, now we know some research, well, lots of research is out there, and that's what we enjoy looking up. Kelly, I wanted to ask you then, why do you think it went the way it did? The traditional way of parenting, the rewards, the bribery, where's that all coming from? Give us a bit of a taste of that.
Sure. So it's based in behaviorism, and it's very much a Western way of parenting, because behaviorism basically only takes behavior into consideration. Emotions and thoughts are, John Watson, the godfather, one could call him, of behaviorism, saw them as unnecessary nuisance. He told parents that if they kiss and cuddle their children or let them sit on their laps, they're going to be spoiling them emotionally, and so they will not see the behavior they want. And he even said, if you really, really have to show physical affection, give them one kiss on the forehead before bed, which, I'm sure no one's really doing in this day and age. But why do we still rely on this kind of positive input for good behavior, negative input for bad behavior? Because it's a hangover of behaviorism. And the reason for this is because it came about in a time where suddenly jobs became a lot more important. People needed day-to-day predictability. They needed a good night's sleep. They had work to do. Yeah. And so this.
Well, sorry, Kelly's jumping a bit. I'm sure it'll catch up. There we go. There we go.
Sorry. They wanted children to behave a certain way, and they got that. They got children who were seen and not heard, and, you know, brought dad their slippers at night and things like that, but at what cost? And the reason that we're still seeing this now is because, you know, our grandparents were raised this way. It became their internalized way of being. They had children. And so that was their default. When they saw these behaviors in their children, their automatic response was what they knew. Our brains are wired to do what you know. And so our parents would have got that. And then most of our parents would still have that kind of internalized, intergenerational way of thinking and responding. And I think, you know, there were some parents of our generation who started undoing this. And I think there's a lot of us undoing it. But that's why it's difficult for us, because we've got this internalized, when we are dysregulated, it's easy to go, you know, sit down, no, and you can get snappy because it's within us. But that's why we're here today. We're going to address it in greater detail, you know, why we get triggered later on. But that's kind of the background of why parenting is how it is.
Yeah, and I think that's so fascinating because, like you say, it is like a hangover effect. Like we still see it in schools, and we still do it ourselves, and you know, it's still such a part of our society. But yeah, that's the whole point of the association. We want to create some change. So thank you. Sorry, I got so excited I started coughing. Okay, so from there, that all being said, I would love to hear from you, Lara, because this is the part I'm really interested in. And it's what I want to be a part of, is the future of parenting. Now that we have this research, what do you see as the future of parenting?
Absolutely. I think we're starting to really shift our mindsets. And that is a key thing, right? We know that our thoughts and our beliefs, they dictate our behaviors. They dictate how we see people, how we see the world, and then how we're going to respond to the world. So one of the first mindset shifts is how we see our children, right? Are we seeing them as these whole capable beings that are separate from us? Yes, but very much dependent and very much attached to us, right? And then we're shifting the way we see ourselves as parents, and we're understanding that in order to take care of our child, we are taking care of ourselves. It's not one or the other, it's both in tandem. And again, there's things that will affect our capability and capacity to do that, like supports, like just general family systems, right? But we are going to a space where we are really understanding that emotional navigation and communication with our children is quite the cornerstone of helping their brains develop in a way that lays foundations for dealing with the world, dealing with triggers, dealing with all these different things. And same with us. As we're teaching our children these things, we're actually teaching ourselves, and we're helping ourselves restructure our brains and our beliefs and our understandings of things. And so it's really encouraging that we are moving in partnership with our children. And then also understanding the role of boundaries, right? There's going to be boundaries for our children that helps them feel secure. And then we don't have to label ourselves as any sort of parent, right? We don't have to be a conscious parent or a respectful parent. We're not striving for perfectionism, right? We all have different backgrounds. We all have different experiences and circumstances. And how are we going to mold this into our life and fit this into our life? And it's really small, gentle steps, and holding yourself gently as the parent and not making yourself feel shame. But it can be uncomfortable to confront these things and to understand that maybe our behavior wasn't the best for ourselves or our children. There will be discomfort there. And how can we change our relationship to that discomfort as well and start seeing it as a mechanism for growth instead of just being hindered by it or defensive? And that will be a natural process, but we can recognize those things and that response and then figure out how to move forward. And the more we do that, the more we practice these things, we're actually changing the structure of our brains, which is amazing. That just by practicing certain things, we are restructuring the physical brain. And so that's just really encouraging and good to know that we can do that. No matter how stuck we might feel, there is a way, but it happens with support and knowledge and resources.
And yet the funny thing is, as you're saying that, it's changed so much, because there was a time when people were saying your brain is your brain and it's never going to change. And then this whole idea of neuroplasticity came into view, and we were like, we can, but we need to sort of know how to do that. Yeah. So speaking of that change and speaking of the brain, let's talk, Kelly, maybe you can tell me a little bit about the structure of the brain and its function in behavior. Or I loved listening to everything you said yesterday when we chatted about it. I want to hear more.
So I'm going to touch on it quite broadly, because obviously the brain is an incredibly complex organ, and I'm not a neuroscientist or anything, but I do love reading about it. So the three main parts of the brain are the kind of the brainstem or reptilian brain, and that's our homeostasis, keeping the right temperature, heartbeat, breathing, swallowing, and flight or fright. It has no emotion, no conscious awareness of self, and no thoughts. Now, the limbic system, I'm going to focus on this from a social point of view. It's referred to as the mammalian or social brain, and it has loads and loads of parts and functions, but the important ones when it comes to parenting are the fact that this is a part of the brain that, as a human being, it drives us to make social connections and be a member of a social circle. As a parent, this is a part of the brain that drives us to love, nurture, and care for our child, and it's especially strong in the mother. As a child, as a baby, this is a part of the brain that's constantly scanning the environment for safety. Is someone looking out for me? And it seeks safety in different ways. It's this part of the brain that wires your newborn to want to be on you all the time. It's this part of the brain that wires your 18-month-old to need to see you every second. You can't leave the room without them calling you or crying for you or running after you. And as an example, yesterday, I was busy in a room, and one of my 4-year-olds was calling me, and I was eventually like, "Oh, Philip, I'm here. Just come find me. You don't have to shout." And he says, "Mom, I just want to follow you all the day." And that just kind of sums up what it's like for a 4-year-old. They just want to be with you and tell you things and have you answer their questions. And now, obviously, it's incredibly idealistic to have your newborn on you 24 hours a day and your 18 months with you all the time, and to answer every single question your 4-year-old asks. Especially with the lives we live now, we can't do that. And this is not to shame a parent who isn't doing that, but it's just to kind of give you perspective, so that when these behaviors arise, you can go, "Oh, yeah, no, I know exactly what he's wanting," and kind of act from a place of knowledge. It makes it easier to deal with. Now, the limbic system also does this amazing thing called limbic resonance, and it's essentially the part of your brain that that senses the emotional state of another person. So, you walk into a room and there's a weird vibe. You can tell by the look on a person's face usually how they're feeling. And this is especially true of children. Their limbic system is so highly formed already by the time that they are 8 months gestation. Before they're even born, they can associate a fear response to something that happens to them. And the last bit of the brain is the prefrontal cortex. So Lara's going to do a nice demo to kind of show you with her hand, because it is like such an abstract with all the words. And the prefrontal cortex, that's where like all your big thoughts are, your higher mental, higher functioning. But for children, this is where it's their seat of reasoning, short-term memory, judgment, attention span, impulse control, and just kind of general cooperation. And the limbic system and the prefrontal cortex have a close relationship. You can see the limbic system as almost a gatekeeper to the thinking brain. If the limbic system is regulated, the thinking brain can fully work. That's when you see a child who's regulated and they are playing nicely with their siblings. You ask them to do something and they're like, "Sure, Mom," and they'll go and do it. They settle for sleep nicely. All those things are a sign of a regulated brain. If the limbic system is dysregulated, it kind of inhibits the thinking brain from working fully. And that's, Lara spoke a bit about behaviors that show dysregulation: the whinging, the whining, the tantrums, bickering with siblings, inflexible behavior, and just general chaos. And Now, our urge, as Lara said, up until now has been to meet these behaviors with punishment or like some kind of behavior modification. You want to change the behavior. And it's how we were raised, it's what we know, it's our default. But when you focus on the behavior, yes, often, through punishment and reward, you can change the behavior, but you're not getting to the root cause. And often it's going to pop up somewhere else. And a lot of behavior modification strategies are taking the parents away. Like timeout is, you don't get to be with me. You're over there, I'm over here. That sort of thing. And a child will always choose attachment. They will always choose being with you over acting on their dysregulation. So they are likely to just suppress that emotion and just save it for later. And that's why often these little things that you kind of stop that, do they will build up and become a tantrum because it needs a way out. Yeah, that's kind of the brain and how it impacts behavior.
Yeah, and it's so fascinating because we've said it all along, sort of because people didn't know this before, and now we do, so we can use it. So with that thinking, obviously we're now researching this because we're so interested in it. So Lara, I'll ask you, or this side, it's an opposite camera, I'll ask you to show us. When I saw this model, it excuse the pun, but it like blew my mind because I was like, now I understand my kids. The fact that the brain is not so developed and I'm expecting adult behavior is not fair. So yeah, could you show us the hand model, the brain in the palm of your hand from Dan Siegel? I think that's such a great one. Sorry.
Absolutely. Yeah, it blew my mind too. I was just like, oh, that makes so much sense. And it's the thing that I'm going to show you is the same thing that is happening in our brains. So if you are watching, you're welcome to do this little demo with us. So we're just going to put our hands up like this. And if we put our thumb in the middle and our hand like this, that is our brain, right? So it's a nice little visual aid, right? So if we open our fingers here, this part is our brain stem. This is where all the neurons and stuff are sending the signals to our brain, essentially. And then if we go up here, this is our amygdala, our hippocampus, and these work together. And this is where the fight or flight response happens. It's our emotions, our triggers, all these things. And if we put our fingers over, this front part is our prefrontal cortex. And that's what helps us reason. That's what helps us stay regulated. It helps us be flexible. It helps us adapt to the situation. And when something happens that is bringing us further and further away from regulation, or that is triggering us, we flip our lids. And so this whole part is on show, it's going, and we can't think straight. And it happens with our kids. And so what we can do is we can start recognizing just when it's starting to flip. We can have a sort of early detection system, right? And it happens, we might tense ourselves. We might feel we can't breathe. We might feel we're starting not to think straight. And so just by knowing that, okay, this is my response to this, we can take the appropriate steps to help ourselves. And then also we can recognize it in our children. And this is a really lovely model that you can start showing your children from about the age of 4 to help them understand what's happening in their brains, and that they're not naughty, they're not bad, they're not terrible for doing these things. But this is what's happening, and this is how me, as the parent, I'm going to help you to steer yourself towards behaviors that are more appropriate. And that's why we do loving boundaries, which really helps our kids feel secure. And then we also do internal boundaries with ourselves. So yeah, that's the hand model of the brain.
Thanks, Lara. And while you were speaking, I know, because when I learned it and they said you can teach it to your child, I thought, I don't think she's going to get what I'm talking about. And I mean, she still may not fully understand it, but I know my daughter will come to me and say, Mommy, I'm feeling like this. And then like a little bit later, she'll say, Mommy, I saw you were feeling like this. And then it's nice because it opens up that communication. We can talk and say, I was feeling a bit like that because of X, Y, Z. But it's amazing. These little people are capable of understanding more sometimes than we give them credit for. So I was going to ask then, Lara, like often people will say, well, what's the big deal? If I lose it with them or I get angry or, I'm human, these things happen, which they do. But I wanted to ask you if you could share with us, is it so important how we respond? What's the big deal? Yeah.
Absolutely. It really, our children absorb so much from us. The way we respond to things is the way they tend to respond to things, right? The way we speak to them becomes their internal voice. It's how they start to see themselves. The way we speak about other people is how they start to see other people and respond to the world. Do we want our children to be very defensive all the time and feel like victimized by everything? Or do we want to help them understand how to process emotion and how to understand their behavior? And it really does start from birth, and how we speak to them, how we understand their behavior shapes how we speak to them, right? So if we're shouting, if we're doing all these things, we're not helping them get to a regulated state. In fact, we're contributing to that dysregulation, right? So we also want to understand our individual children. Some kids enjoy a little hug. They enjoy being held close. That helps them regulate. Other kids in those moments will be like, oh, no, don't touch me. I can't deal with this. And sometimes we can take that a little bit personally and be like, oh, my kid doesn't want me. But we're going to bring ourselves back to the understanding that we are the parent and we are here to help and support them. And we are going to be here no matter what. If you're pushing me away, oh, yes, I hear you. I understand that. I'm still going to be here for you. I'm right here. I see you. And then we're also going to be understanding when it's appropriate to use our language and our words, or if we're just going to be saying, because we know that a lot of noise can also contribute to dysregulation. And often that's not the time to be saying, oh, yes, you're feeling like this. And it's really sometimes not the time to do emotional coaching and emotional awareness. That we can do afterwards. So it's just about dropping in, getting curious as the parent, and knowing that you're always learning. And as our children grow, they're going to be changing, and we're going to sometimes have to catch up a little bit. We're not always going to be prepared, and we're not always going to say the right things, and we're not always going to be able to not shout and not return to these things that are so conditioned and normal for us. But it does matter, and it helps their brain regulate and structure their architecture, and it's really awesome.
That's so great. Thanks, Lara. I see Christelle here says, we found massive changes in my son's behavior when we started explaining to him things to him at his level instead of just expecting him to comply with what we want. And that's so great because when we come at them from our level and we expect them to understand, I mean, even though I was saying they understand so much, they really only understand what they understand, because that prefrontal cortex is so I hate to say the word underdeveloped, because it is what it is, but it's not fully developed, and there's still such a long way to go. I see Kelly's a little bit fuzzy. Yeah, I think we'll bring Kelly back in a sec. But it leads me to I wanted to ask you a bit about the traditional parenting of punishment, reward. How do you feel this ties in with the brain? Because people will say, well, it works, but at what cost, like Kelly was saying earlier?
Absolutely. And again, it does work. And if you are using punishments and rewards with your kiddos, one, it doesn't mean that you don't love your child. And two, it doesn't mean that your child's not going to love you. It's not necessarily that it's going to affect your attachment. It's not really taking away too much, but there are other and more sustainable ways of interacting with our kids and taking them through these things and helping them apply boundaries. With rewards, we see when we give a reward, it activates the dopamine pathways, right? So that's what keeps them wanting to do the behavior, because they know, cool, I'm going to get this reward. But what happens when they no longer want that reward, when that reward isn't tantalizing enough? We start having to give them more things, do more this, we start convincing and bribing. And that really doesn't support their capacity for processing actually how to get tasks done. And so what we want to sort of shift our mindset to there is that the behavior itself is the reward. So I can give the example of brushing our teeth. We don't brush our teeth to get a sweetie. We brush our teeth because our teeth are going to be clean and healthy. We don't clean our house because we're going to get a piece of chocolate. We clean it because it feels good for us to clean it. We're honoring each other. We're honoring our space to clean the house. And the more we try and convince them to do the things, the less they're going to realize that actually sometimes I don't want to do things, but I'm still going to do it. And that's a really lovely skill to teach our kids. And it is a skill. It's something that they learn, something that we're going to have to understand our expectations with, right? We're not going to expect a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old or whatever do the things. We're going to understand that there's a process to it, and a lot of the time it looks like us supporting them through it. And then with punishments as well, we know that often punishments elicit shame, and that sort of shuts down their ability to actually learn anything. They go into a defensive mode, or like Kelly said, they feel threatened in their engagement with you. They feel disconnect. And so we can really start to move away from these things, and slowly, you don't have to cut it out completely, but you can be gentle with yourself, and you can slowly move away from punishments and rewards.
Yeah, I like how you say that. I mean, it's a process, and we do what we know. We actually got a question here. Do you recommend reward charts?
Hold on, we are disconnecting.
I'll take this one so long if it's disconnecting. So Trish, just as Lara was saying, when it comes to the brain, and actually we were speaking a bit about this the other day, reward charts work. We know that they work, but for how long? And what is our long-term goal with a reward chart? So if our long-term goal is getting them to do what we want, what we, as a Conscious Parenting Association, me as a parent coach, I try to encourage parents to look at the why. Why do we want them to do it? And what are the long-term lessons going to be if we use reward? And I would never say to someone, don't use reward. I would encourage you to see what else there is, because there are so many other tools that you can use. What I like to talk about a lot is the intrinsic motivation and extrinsic. So if everything is extrinsic, if you do this, you get this. If you do this, you get praised. If you do this, it's all external. What about that internal? I want to do this because it's what I want to do and it's the right thing to do, and I'm learning that for myself. I hope that that's answered your question. So we try to sort of steer clear of reward charts, and I'll hand over to Lara and Kelly. They can add a bit more if either of them want to. Do either of you have anything you want to add to what I was saying? If you heard it?
I think that was perfect what you said, especially with the intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. That's really, and that is what happens is our kiddos start to go, oh, I don't do this thing because I just don't do it. Like, you're helping them, you're giving them that boundary. And I see it with my 2-year-old, and it doesn't always happen the first time. It doesn't always happen the second time. But the more you help them and guide them, the more they're going to be like, I see my daughter picking up a pen, and it's so sweet. She wants to run and draw on the walls. And she knows that she's not supposed to do it. And sometimes she'll like give a look. And we've gotten to the point where she'll go, no, to herself. And I'm watching her do it. She goes, paper. And then she'll run to the paper. And if I were to have used any sort of coaxing or even punishment, right, what they can do is they can often hook them into the behavior, right? They get a little bit knocked off their axis when we aren't sure of ourselves, or when we don't confidently help them. They get a bit knocked off, or they get a little bit like, whoa, what's happening here? And they're not intending, oh, I'm going to do this thing because you're doing that. It's just something that's happening in their brain, and they're like, oh, your mom is doing me emotional expression. I'm going to keep doing this thing because that's interesting. That's really interesting. And they do sometimes feel quite, they don't feel very secure if we don't give them boundaries. And we can do that really slowly and gently. It doesn't have to be shouting. It doesn't have to be shaming them or labeling the thing even. Drawing on a wall is not bad. It's just that we don't want them to do it because it kind of messes up the wall, and that's not practical for us to keep having to clean up the wall. And also for me, I want to instill the value of respect for our environment, respect for our space. And they can't understand that concept, but the boundary is going to help them get there eventually.
Thanks, Lara. Yeah, thank you. Sorry.
I just want to add, I think a lot of the reward charts are around kind of developing things like toilet training and things like that. And often they aren't ready to do it. And so they get this pressure to do something that they don't really actually know how to do, and that can cause a bit of stress. mean, Lara also spoke a bit about impulse control, drawing on walls. I wanted to add that our impulse control is only fully developed when we are 27 years old, on average.
Sorry, Kelly was breaking up there. I didn't want to cut her off. Hopefully she can come back on again. I think what she was busy talking about was we asking them to do something and they want the reward so badly, but they may not physically, emotionally, mentally be capable of doing it. And I've seen that with my daughter with potty training. She's not ready and she's showing me she's not ready. But you know, if I would just want her to do the thing, I'm not really helping her and I'm not understanding where she's at. Yeah. If we go back to our dysregulation, I wanted to ask you, Lara, shame. I know Kelly had a lot to share.
Sorry, we're all being disconnected over here.
I wanted to ask you, what sort of practical tips can you give people in terms of their own emotions? Can you hear me, Lara?
I can't, I know.
Oh no, it's just me again.
Sorry about that. I don't know what's going on. The internet gremlins are against us today, it seems. What was your question going to be for Lara?
So we were talking about the practical tips now towards the brain and what they can actually do at home for regulating themselves, regulating their children. Maybe you can take some of those as well. Let's hear what you.
I'm going to see if Lara can come back. Until she does, the one thing that I've learned that really does work, because I struggle so much with flipping my lid. I'm terrible at it. I've had a long history of flipping, and you know, one thing that's really, really easy to do in the moment is breath work. So there's lots of things you can do, you know, out of the moment, but in the moment, taking a small breath in and then a long breath out is a really beneficial thing to do, because when you breathe in, you're activating your sympathetic nervous system. But when you're breathing out, you're activating your parasympathetic nervous system. And your sympathetic nervous system is the stress response, fight or flight, all of that. But your parasympathetic is the thing that brings you back to regulation. And so it calms you down. It's the thing that activates when you are in a calm state, when you're meditating, when you're just relaxed. And so if you can kind of cheat your own body by going, you know, that's why a lot of yoga and mindfulness is based on breath, because when you breathe out, you are technically tricking yourself to be calm. And it turns off that alarm system in your brain. It turns off your limbic system and it says, okay, cool, we can be calm now. So you just breathe in for, let's say, 3 or 4 seconds, but then you breathe out for 6 to 8 seconds, because you're then activating the parasympathetic more so than the sympathetic. And I found that very, very helpful to allow me to go from here and back down to, you know, reintegrating my brain. Okay, let's see if we can get Lara back here. I think she's on. Let's have a look. There we go. Got you back.
There we go. You're back. Yay. Okay. Yeah. So Lara, we were talking about practical tips in terms of regulation for us or our kids. I know Jess just added some for us. If you have any more, you can add as well.
Sorry, I'm still being. The internet is being so weird.
That's fine. Sure.
So we're talking about regulation in terms of ourselves or our children?
In terms of both, you can give me tips for either one. I know we were going to do them separately, but together is fine too.
So in terms of regulation, for both, the first step is just recognizing, right? And that happens when we observe. And again, I had said this in our last talk, actually, is getting on your parenting balcony, right? So getting a little bit away from the situation so that you can see the reality and so that you can see all the moving parts, right? When we're right on top of it, when we're right into it, when we're taking things personally or reacting, it's much harder for us to see all the things that we actually can be doing and how we can calmly guide our children. And then again, just recognizing what the trigger is for them. And that could be maybe they're tired, maybe they're hungry, maybe they're needing to move a little bit, or maybe they're needing to go and sit and read a book with you. Maybe they're craving a little bit of one-on-one time. So understanding what is bringing the behavior about, but also what you can do to help get them a little bit regulated. And the goal isn't just to say, I need them to get regulated. It's the process of getting them there. And sometimes there's nothing that we can't say anything, but just sit with them while they are getting out all these emotions. Sometimes they need a good cry. It's good for their nervous systems. It's good we know when we have a good cry, we feel a little bit better. We feel like we can take a breath. But it also, we feel that sort of hangover from those emotions, right? We do feel a little bit more tired, but we've gotten that out, and we need to express the emotion. And similarly with us as parents, we can communicate to our children when we are feeling a little bit not so great, if we're feeling a bit sad, if we're feeling a little bit frustrated. Ooh, mom's feeling so frustrated now. I know you're wanting to do these things. A boundary, I can't pick you up right now. This is what I can do. You can come sit next to me, but I'm going to sit here. I'm going to have a little bit of rest. And also, we're not going to be expecting them to go, cool, mom, that sounds good. I'm empathizing with you. But we are going to be building their capacity for empathy in that way. And eventually, they're going to get to a point where you say, oh, I'm just feeling so tired. And they'll be like, oh, you need a rest. You're going to be sitting down now. But we're not going to expect that from the get-go. We're going to know that it is a process and it's going to change, right? We have different states. Sometimes our kids are going to be a little bit less able to accept that we need a little bit of a break. And sometimes they're going to be fine with that. So it's just, being aware of the situation itself and knowing that you're going to have to adapt to it, and then having your systems in place for support. Is really important. So who can I turn to when I'm feeling like this? What's my greatest support system? What are my skills that I'm developing here? So am I developing a skill for planning? Because that's really helpful. And then I know that Kelly has some really cool, and you probably too, Claire, really cool ways that we personally do to take care of ourselves.
So Kelly, can we hand over to you to add to it? Sorry, we've missed a whole bunch of what you were going to say. Are you there? Can you hear us? Oh, sorry.
Oh, no.
Let's see if she comes back on this side. There we go. Kelly, quickly talk to us. Tell us what you have to say.
Lara said a lot of what I would have added there, but I think one thing we need to also just bear in mind is that children up until, for your average developing child between the age of 5 and 7, and sensitive children between the age of 7 and 9, they cannot take other people's perspectives into account. They are very egocentric. And so anything that goes on around them, they think is caused directly by them. And now I've spoken about that limbic resonance. They can, if you try to hold together and you get irritated and grumpy and you come home and you've had a hard day, they can pick it up. If you don't tell them that it's not them, they're going to think it's them. And so you dysregulate them. And then whatever behavior they're engaging in just escalates and gets harder for you to deal with. So it's very important, as Lara said, to kind of step in and say, oh, as soon as you start feeling your child triggering you, deep rest and
sorry, Kelly's cutting off a bit again. Sorry, Kelly. I think we're going to have to say goodbye to Kelly. Sorry, everyone. I hope you heard that. So what Kelly was basically saying, there's that limbic resonance where your kids can pick up on what you're feeling, even if you don't think that they can pick it up. They know. And often they take that on themselves. Like Kelly was saying, if you didn't hear, children are so egocentric. Developmentally, they're not choosing to be that way. They're not trying to be selfish. They're not trying to make everything about themselves. It's just literally, we're talking about the brain. It's the way their brain is at that stage, and it will change in time, and we can't force it to change. But like she was saying, we can tell our children what we are feeling and why, so that they're not thinking, I've done something wrong, it's about me, they're feeling cross with me. And often our children do take that on themselves without us even knowing. And it's, again, not to shame or blame anyone that's watching. It's just to make you aware of when you are feeling something and you tell them, you are also developing that emotional intelligence that all of us want in our children. So they start picking up on feelings from others at school, and they realize they're feeling that because of them, not because of me. So that was something, I think that's what she was trying to add. Shame, the internet's not great on both sides. Kelly's actually close to Nelspruit. She's White River, and Lara is Cape Town. I'm Benoni. Jess is Nelspruit, Midrand. So we're a little bit all over the place. If you have any other questions, because we're getting towards the end of our talk now, if you have any other questions, please add them on the Facebook, on the comments. And then Jess, if you want to jump in and add anything, because I know you love this topic, so Jump in
do we
and
have
add
another
what
3
you can.
hours? No, I'm so
everyone
sad
do
about the internet because I know that Kelly and Lara had so much more to share. The one thing that I find very interesting about this stuff is that, I can't remember who was mentioning it, but about that inner voice that we get. And this, the limbic resonance and all that. I've always wondered, and this might be a very, triggering topic, but it's a very common phenomenon that children who were abused as children end up becoming abusers. And it makes no sense, because if you knew like that you hated it so much, if it was such a traumatic experience, why would you want to repeat it? It makes absolutely no logical sense. You would want to avoid it, and you'd want to, teach your children that you love them. The trouble is, which I've now learned, through becoming, more familiar with all the psychology, is that the children, when they're in that, sensitive period, this is the language they've learned. These are the neurons that have been, that have now formed in that early development. And so they've never learned how to respond kindly. They've never learned any other tools, any other mechanisms other than, when I get angry, I need to hit. When I get angry, I need to scream. And so it really is about, that neuroplasticity, that changing, the response you've got, not just the emotional response, the behavioral response, and the physiology, all of it. We need to look at how this is actually going to, create the future for the child that is in front of us today, and how that's going to then affect how they parent, how they, interact with people, with their colleagues, with their families, with their siblings, all of it. And I find that incredibly interesting, because, it's a little bit terrifying to know that we have that much power, but also that we can undo it, that we can learn to be better, that we can make ourselves better, that we can, become happier people, that we can become more conscious people. All of that is just like mind-blowing to me. I love that stuff.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, like you said, it's being conscious. Like, if some people are never conscious of it, and that's when these things pass down to their kids, because they're just not aware of it. And it doesn't mean they're bad, it doesn't mean they're wrong, they just don't know. And that's why we're here. I keep saying it, but I want to spread the message that you can become more conscious. And we
don't have all the answers either, like Kelly was saying, we're not neuroscientists, but just knowing a little bit about it, just knowing something as simple as, the brain in the palm of your hand. I taught this to my 5-year-old. I taught it to him when he was about 4-ish. And like you said, you don't know how much they're going to learn from it. But what I found with him was that when I do this, it's a signal for us now. So if I'm feeling completely just flipped and I go like this, he knows, okay, it's time to take a break. And he can do the same for me, because it doesn't always look like the same thing. Being flipped doesn't, could for one person mean, running around the house and screaming. For another person, flipped could be very, inhibited and, going into your own head and fuming inside. So if I just show the signal, he shows me the signal, it tells us both that we're not in the right place to have an argument. When you're arguing with your amygdalas, you're thinking about all the old baggage and all those past memories and all those past hurts and all of your own childhood baggage. This is not the time to fight with everyone. And so what we want to do is we want to take that break, take a couple breaths. And that can be, 3 minutes. It can be a couple hours. Sometimes it takes longer. And then we can, come back and I can just show him a signal. I don't even have to use words. I could just go like this. And then he knows that I'm ready, and he can still show me this. And okay, you're not ready yet. And so it's little tools like that he doesn't have to understand exactly where all the brain structures are. He just knows that the signal means not now, which is a lovely way to, teach him, some self-restraint and to know when to have an argument and when not to.
Yeah. And that emotional intelligence as well.
100%.
So those of you at home, what I wanted to also add is that we've said it. We don't want you to feel like because you don't know this stuff, you're a bad mom, you're a bad dad, you're a bad parent, you're a bad whatever it is. But what we'd like to do is still just offer support. There's so much support out there. We actually have Lara and Kelly's information. We'll put it across now. I just saw someone said something. I'm guilty of getting angry and shouting. I have really been trying to use my words more kindly and explaining why I am angry at what he has done. Yeah, and that's such a big step of just taking that time to be aware of your own feelings, so that he can also hopefully understand them as well.
I would like to point out, though, that Trish, you're not guilty of anything. This is, guilt is absolutely wasted. It's a very expensive emotion, and you're not guilty. Being angry is a big part of our emotions, and it's fine to be angry. I think that, if you have, when I started this journey as well, I started thinking, oh, I'm never allowed to lose my temper. I have to model the perfect behavior for my children, or they're going to be broken. But you're allowed to flip your lid. And then you can come back and say, this is exactly what happened. Just like you say, that you can explain where that anger came from and what triggered you. I had a moment yesterday with my son that I completely lost it because of other things that had happened that had set me off earlier in the day. And I completely lost it. And then it took until, last night when we were going to sleep, I just said, I really want to apologize for my behavior earlier. I was really upset, and it wasn't a great response. I'm going to work on trying to be better. But and he said, no, it's okay, Mommy. I was also very angry, and that's a perfectly acceptable conversation to have. I see here that Christelle's had a light bulb moment.
So I just had a light bulb moment on something I struggle with as an adult, and I can see how it came from taking on my parents' emotional states as my fault. Wow, Christelle, that's a huge one. Thanks for sharing that with us. That's amazing. And so true. We all do it sometimes without even noticing that we're doing it. And then we don't want to pass that on to our kids. Maybe unknowingly it happens, but we don't want to do it consciously. So thanks for sharing that.
I'm going to try and bring Kelly and Lara back, and then they can tell us where they can
tell us where they can get hold of us. And we have a prize as well. So Kelly has a prize that she's giving. Let's see if Kelly can explain her prize to us. Kelly, can you hear us? Can you explain your prize?
Okay. Thank you. Remember exactly what it is. I think it was I don't remember the exact discount, but it was a discount on a 1-hour consult with me.
Yes, it was a discount on a consult. Yes. So someone can win a consult with Kelly, an online one. I'm guessing. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes.
Unless you live in Nelspruit or White River, which would be miraculous. Okay.
Unless you live in Nelspruit or White River, if you didn't hear. So you can add in the comments if you want to win this prize, and we'll be announcing it on Thursday in our next talk. And if you want to get hold of Kelly, she's at www.consciousconfidentparenting.co.za. And if you want to get hold of Lara, there's Kelly's. If you want to get hold of Lara, she's at www.rooyenparenting.com.
There, we've got Lara back as well. We got just in time to say goodbye.
Thank you for joining us today. We will definitely be planning more talks like this in the coming months, so people won't have to say goodbye to you just yet. They'll see you again. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for all your lovely information. There will be more opportunities for you to share more of your amazing info. So I'm sorry we couldn't do it all today, but thank you.
Thank you for having us. This was so fun. I love this topic. It's the best.
We can talk all day. And thank you everyone at home for watching. I hope that you learned some things like Christelle did, and Trisha was telling us some things. So tell us in the comments what you learned. Come and watch on Thursday. This is Thursday now with the long weekend. Come and watch us on Tuesday. We have a talk about teens, and we're going to talk a bit about the teen brain, because it's not different, but it's a different phase of development. So that's going to be really interesting. So I hope to see you there, and I hope everyone has a lovely day. Cheers, everyone.
Thanks everyone for watching. Bye.